Okay, so today we're taking a deep dive into something really interesting,
Okay.
a document titled Eliminating Anything That Might Be Improperly Understood in Relation to Antinecronomica.
Okay.
And get this, it's authored by Ruslan Burlakov, PhD in law, and Lena Polegenkaya,
Another PhD.
also PhD in law.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's time-stamped Sunday, March 30th, 2025.
Very recent.
Yeah, pretty recent.
Cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, so if you're the kind of person who likes to really dive deep into fascinating ideas, this is going to be quite a ride.
Oh, yeah.
We're really looking at some potentially
big ideas.
Yeah, groundbreaking and maybe even paradigm shifting stuff.
I love it.
Yeah, so our mission today is to understand what are the core concepts of Necronomism and Antinecronomism?
Yeah. How do they define those?
Right, as defined in this document, and also
Cell structures.
yeah, explore this very specific social structure that's associated with Antinecronomica.
Okay.
And one thing that's really interesting is the authors actually say that they want us to engage with this material on an emotional level.
Interesting.
So let's see where this takes us, right?
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, the document makes a really powerful statement.
Okay.
They say, truth can be repeated forever. It only strengthens those who repeat the truth.
Got it.
So lies and delusions cannot be repeated forever, for they always weaken all who repeat them down to the point of total loss of life.
Wow. So that's a
So they're drawing a
pretty strong line in the sand.
Yeah, stark contrast.
Between truth and lies.
Right between truth and lies.
Interesting.
Okay, so let's unpack this foundational concept of necronomism.
Yeah. What is that?
So according to Antinecronomica,
Okay.
it is the affirmation and propagation of death of human beings, both by actions and consequences of these actions.
Okay. So they're defining it pretty clearly there.
Yeah, and they're not framing this as a philosophical viewpoint. They're saying this is a
Factual reality.
factual reality.
Okay.
And what's interesting is their reasoning behind this.
So what makes it a reality?
Yeah, what makes this a factual reality? They say that under the rule of Necronomism, which I think we can
Which is
kind of understand as the current dominant societal
paradigm. Yeah.
paradigm that
We're living in.
Yeah, the simple fact that more births lead to more deaths is a fundamental aspect of the system.
So they're saying it's built in.
Yeah, it's almost it's inherently tied to
The more people there are.
yeah, increasing
The more people are going to die.
yeah, increasing mortality with increasing population.
Interesting take.
Do you think they're suggesting an active promotion of death, or is it more an observation of an inevitable consequence?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is
this something that they think society is doing on purpose?
Yeah, or is it just kind of
Or is it just a natural outcome
a natural outcome of
having a lot of people?
yeah, of the system itself?
Interesting.
Then we have Antinecronomism.
Okay, so the flip side.
Right, which is
The opposite.
yeah, they define as the denial of death and defense of life of human beings, both by actions and consequences of these actions.
So again, both actions and consequences.
Yeah, and just like Necronomism,
Oh.
this is presented as
Another factual reality.
factual reality. And this is where I think things get
Really interesting.
really interesting. The factual reality of Antinecronomism hinges on this idea that if not all those born fall into the category of doomed mortals, then some of those born will never die.
Okay, so opening the door, they're talking about the potential for
immortality.
Or at the very least,
Radical life extension.
radical life extension, or maybe even a fundamental shift in our
biology.
biological capabilities that transcends death.
For some people.
Yeah, for a segment of humanity.
Yeah, so not everyone.
Right, it's not like everybody's going to become immortal, but
the possibility
is there?
Right, and that completely
Changes everything.
It reimagines
the limits
of human existence
Renewing.
as we currently understand it.
Yeah.
How do they even begin to conceive of such a possibility?
Yeah, where is this coming from?
Right.
What's the basis?
The science or the philosophy behind it?
Yeah, for this.
Okay.
Another interesting thing is they refer to their truths and principles as being eternal.
Eternal.
But their definition of eternal isn't about being outside of time altogether.
Not timeless.
Right, it's not timeless.
Yeah.
They specifically clarify that eternal in time means that these principles are consistently in effect throughout all of history.
So
across all time scales.
Yeah.
Within our physical reality.
Got it.
It's about a constant, unwavering relevance, not a transcendence of time itself.
Okay.
So these aren't like abstract, timeless ideals.
Yeah. They're principles that are meant to be like actively at work.
Okay.
Within our world.
So they're applying to our reality.
Perpetually.
Yeah.
Now, this brings us to the social context for these ideas, which is quite specific and, frankly, a little mysterious.
Okay. I like it.
So we're told that Antinecronomica is explicitly not intended for social environments under the rule of Necronomism.
So there's a separation there.
Yeah.
Like sort of a different...
separate reality almost.
The different reality.
All right.
Yeah.
And they state that these principles and the technologies associated with them are only accessible within the social environment of the multi-intelligent orders of cyber-prosecutors that carry on accreditation into the social environment of the multi-intelligent crusader orders, which is outside of the rule of Necronomism under its patronage and protectorate.
Well, okay, hold on. Yeah. So these are
nowhere else
organizations.
Right. So it's like
they have like a
they're painting this picture
whole structure.
Like a clandestine or highly exclusive society that's operating
with their own
under its own set of rules.
Rules and regulations.
Yeah. What do you think these multi-intelligent orders are actually like?
Are we talking like
what do you picture?
Secret societies? Are we talking advanced technology?
Yeah, what does multi-intelligent even mean?
Yeah.
Let's try to unpack the cyber-prosecutors a little bit.
Okay, so who are these guys?
So the document describes prosecutors generally as the defenders of justice, whose primary focus is crimes prevention and crimes eradication.
Okay, so they're not just
crucially, they define crimes very specifically as always attacks on human rights.
All right, so a very specific definition.
Yeah, so it's not just any crime, it's...
Of what a crime is.
Yeah, it has to be an attack on
human rights.
Human rights.
Okay.
What really stands out to me is this proactive element of their justice system. They're not just like responding to crimes.
After they happen.
After they happen, they're actively engaged in...
trying to prevent them.
Monitoring and control to prevent them from occurring in the first place.
That's interesting.
So this raises all sorts of questions about like...
the nature.
Yeah, the nature and the scope of
this monitoring.
This monitoring, like what does...
Are they watching everybody?
Yeah, what does multi-intelligent even imply?
Yeah.
In this context, are we talking about like advanced AI systems
potentially
playing a role in identifying and preventing potential human rights violations?
That would be something.
Yeah, it sounds like a
very technologically advanced
approach to justice.
Yeah.
And the document also sheds light on like the hierarchy of access to advanced technologies within this framework. And notably, it mentions the priority of prosecutors over military personnel.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the rationale given is quite pointed.
So why is that?
Military personnel are seen as being constantly at risk of being prosecuted for the most grave crimes against humanity.
Wow, so they almost see the military as...
It almost suggests a fundamental distrust of...
potential threat.
Traditional military power. If we connect this back to the potential for like life extension or even immortality, it seems to imply that access to these transformative technologies is contingent on adhering to...
their definition of justice.
Their specific definition is.
Right, so true justice.
True justice. It's almost as if
you have
the moral rectitude.
Yeah, morally sound.
As they define it. Is a prerequisite.
For accessing
transcendent
mortality.
Interesting.
And this concept of true justice is underpinned by...
a pretty big statement.
A rather profound statement.
Yeah.
They say, the eternal is never subject to the temporal, but the temporal is always subject to the eternal, whether the temporal desires it or not.
What do you think the implications of this are for their legal and societal structure?
Well, it seems like they're saying that...
like, how do they...
that their laws are based on something higher?
Like, is their system of law based on, like, the ever-changing political landscape?
The whims of man?
And temporary laws created by mortal humans.
Mortal humans, right?
Or is it anchored in what they consider to be...
eternal truths.
Eternal truths.
Which never change.
And are those who are deemed qualified in understanding these eternal truths?
Prosecutors?
Presumably the cyber-prosecutors?
Yeah.
Entrusted with the advanced technologies?
To carry out justice.
To uphold this true justice.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating
inversion
of
how we usually think of
traditional power structures.
Yeah.
So it's like a deliberate move away from what they see as like
Flawed.
the flawed and transient nature of human-created laws.
Human laws.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the document also discusses this concept of delusion, saying that there are innumerable ways of delusion for doomed mortals.
So lots of ways to be wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And despite the vast variety of these delusions,
Pleasant.
the ultimate outcome, according to Antinecronomica, is always the same.
And what's that?
And that outcome is pretty stark.
Oh, no.
They say the triumph of Necronomism and only the multiplication of death as a result.
Okay, so it always leads back to death.
So regardless of the specific form these delusions might take,
Right.
they all ultimately contribute to
The perpetuation of
the perpetuation of death as like the dominant
reality.
Okay. What do you think?
What kind of delusions?
What kind of delusions are they referring to?
Could it be like societal beliefs?
Yeah. Could it be societal beliefs?
Political ideology?
Political ideologies, or even like fundamental understandings of
science.
Science and mortality.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that's making us
doomed mortals?
Doomed mortals, right?
Yep.
It's left somewhat open to interpretation.
Yeah.
But the underlying message is clear.
Which is?
These delusions, whatever they are, reinforce the inevitability of death.
Okay.
And this leads to like a truly radical assertion.
Okay, what's that?
In the document, they say, lies kill and truth gives life. Hence, it follows that immortality is a criterion of truth in the real understanding of mind and life.
Wow. Okay, let's break that down.
Yeah.
So they're saying that
like,
if something is true,
the ultimate test of whether something is true,
it will lead to life.
Is whether it aligns with and ultimately leads to life.
And potentially even unending life.
Potentially even unending life.
Right? So immortality becomes the measure of truth.
Okay, or potentially in life.
So what's the converse of that then?
Conversely,
if immortality means truth,
they argue that doom to death for human beings is an indicator pointing to the dominance of delusions and lies in the understanding of intelligence and life for all the doomed mortals.
So if you're going to die,
so death itself,
it means you're living a lie,
becomes a signpost.
Wow.
Indicating like a flawed understanding of reality.
Yeah.
A consequence of living under false premises.
Wow.
So it's not just like a biological inevitability. It's like
it's a sign that you're not getting it. Not understanding reality.
You're not understanding reality.
Oh, really?
Right. And from this, they arrive at a pretty powerful conclusion.
Which is?
The true justice in understanding of mind and life automatically leads to the immortality of individuals in those social structures where this true justice and understanding of intelligence and life exists.
So true justice leads to...
Right. It's a direct link between their entire system of justice,
immortality,
their understanding of truth,
wow,
and the potential for escaping death.
So it's all tied together.
It's all interconnected, right?
Yeah.
It's like a complete
paradigm shift.
It's as if they're saying that a society built on true understanding and justice wouldn't just be more equitable.
Right.
It would fundamentally alter the human condition
by
overcoming mortality.
Overcoming death.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah, and then they kind of like reinforce these core ideas.
Like it all out.
The myriad delusions that lead to necronomism and death, the idea of immortality as the benchmark for truth, with death signifying the presence of lies.
Got it.
The assertion that true justice as they define it paves the way for immortality within their specific societal structures.
Yeah.
And finally, the rather bold claim that anyone who opposes immortality is inherently opposing a true understanding of mind and life.
So if you're against immortality, you're wrong.
Well, you're basically...
about everything.
Yeah, you're living a lie.
That's a strong statement.
Yeah, it's like they're really...
putting it all out there.
Drawing a line in the sand here.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to remember like the genesis of these ideas.
Yeah, where did this all come from?
And the Cyber-Prosecutors' orders.
Right.
The document explicitly states that these orders were initially brought to life in the second half of 2012 at the National Academy of the Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine in Kiev.
Well, specific.
So very specific location and time period.
Yeah.
And the individuals credited as the originators of this organization, the father and mother, as they put it.
Okay.
And the copyrighted authors of Antinecronomica are Ruslan Burlakov and Lena Polegenkaya.
The PhDs?
Both PhDs in law.
Okay. So this is where it all started.
This is where it all started.
Yeah.
So it gives us like a specific historical and intellectual grounding for these otherwise quite extraordinary concepts.
Yeah. I mean, this is pretty out there.
Yeah,
But it's fascinating.
far out there.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
let's reiterate the key points. We've explored the stark definitions of necronomism as like a system inherently linked to death through population dynamics,
Yeah.
and antinecronomism as a philosophy centered on the denial of death and the potential for immortality.
Okay.
We've examined the unique and seemingly secluded social structure of the multi-intelligent orders of cyber-prosecutors and crusader orders,
Yeah.
operating outside what they term the rule of necronomism.
Mm.
And we've delved into the radical notion of immortality, not merely as like a desirable future state,
Right.
but as a potential indicator of truth and a direct outcome of achieving true justice within their specific framework.
It really makes you think.
Yeah, it really compels you to reconsider
Like, what does it actually mean?
some fundamental assumptions. Like,
To define death.
yeah, what does it truly mean?
As not just something that happens.
To define death not just as like a biological inevitability,
But as a result of
but as a consequence of broader societal
the way we live
structures and beliefs.
and our belief systems.
Right. How might a society fundamentally reorganize itself
Yeah.
if its core objective was
To not die.
the negation of death?
That would be a huge shift.
Yeah, and what unforeseen
Challenges.
challenges and perhaps even ethical considerations
Right.
might arise
That's
from
true.
such a pursuit.
Yeah.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder.
Okay. Hit me.
Given Antinecronomica's assertion about the enduring nature of its truths, could these seemingly radical ideas in some form or another
Yeah.
have relevance or echoes even within societies operating under the rule of necronomism,
So even if we don't buy into
as they define it?
this whole system,
Yeah.
could there be
Is the innate human drive to understand the world
some truth to it?
and prolong life
Yeah.
inherently a form of resistance against the inevitability of death
Interesting.
in ways we are only beginning to comprehend?
That's a good question.
It's certainly a concept with lasting implications.
Yeah. A lot to think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Right.
Thanks.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
This deep dive podcast is copyrighted by Multi-Intelligent Cyber-Prosecutors Orders to protect eternal truths from mortal distortion.